You know, I operate. Who's he? Oh, see, nosy. So I operate sometimes in idealism and quite frankly, a little bit of delusion. um, because when I plan to start Talk Tuesday, which is what today is, I did not take into consideration that this is exam week for me. Just crazy. Crazy as fuck, I might add. But so I adjusted it. I think going forward, looking at my schedule, my typical schedule, we're probably gonna do Talk Tuesday a little bit earlier in the day. I don't anticipate most people will watch the live, but doing it live as opposed to recording a video, chopping it up. I do enough editing in my day to day life as a filmographer, and as a photographer as well. So I don't have any desire to edit any more than I need to. So these live series, both yesterday starting Music Mondays, today being Talk Tuesdays, Sunday, we start the bi-weekly for Soul Care Sundays, and then on the 11th, the that one may be an actual edited video. I don't know. I haven't decided that one yet because it's one that's more monthly, and it's really just me having some tea, sitting down talking about books, right. And what books? Because I read a lot. I read a lot. So I said all that to say it's a lot to be expected, and I really didn't consider, like, I didn't want to keep waiting to say, okay, I'm gonna do it in January. I'm gonna do it at the top of the year. I'm like, no, we're gonna do it this, but I could have very well started this next week once school was over. But such is life, the chaos that is. Uh-oh. I think also my face is a little dry. I'm gonna close some things in the background that are slowing down my computer. Do I have anything open on that tab? Okay, no, we can close that one. It's a little ghetto. Sorry, y'all. Just bear with me 1 second. And if you're watching this back, just skip ahead to when I'm not looking like I'm looking at my computer because I can't see. It's no longer attached to the in my office space where the okay. So that's working in the background. I can close this. I can close that. Hey, I can see myself this time because I'm actually on this screen. This I need to leave open because I will lose my place and I don't want to bookmark it or go figuring it out from the history standpoint. This tab I can literally close completely. That was yesterday's stuff. See, I got a bad habit of leaving things open, like closing my laptop. And this I don't want to close. Okay. So welcome to the first Talk Tuesday, which is an almost weekly, which is different from Music Mondays, which is bi-weekly, and on the opposing opposing weeks is Soul Care Sunday. So it's going to be like yesterday was Monday, next coming Sunday, and then the following Monday. That will be that schedule for those two live series. This one, Talk Tuesday, like I said, is almost weekly, and so my goal for Talk Tuesday is to be a unedited, raw, authentic version of my more polished podcast. For those of you who don't know, I do have a podcast that I started actually back in 2021 and failed miserably at maintaining it just because of what was going on in my personal neurodevelopmental and mental world. And I'm in a much better place now. Now being on the other side of 30, y'all know that Saturn's return was fucking ghetto. And I experienced the highs and lows of that transitional period. So Talk Tuesday is really where I can just brain dump healthily, I guess. I do sometimes I do this on TikTok and I realize that that's not really a good place for long form discussions. And I used to, on my old TikTok, have an actual live series that I would do every week, um, under the same name of Talk Tuesday. But because that live got banned, because weirdos were flocking to it and upset with me talking about my truth, which we'll be delving into throughout these coming weeks and just in general, because I falling out with people is laughable, especially people who, despite the public BS, I had and still held a high regard for them, so much so that I wrote about them in a book and I didn't have to. And that was part of a lawsuit that was against me. This girl tried to sue me for $500,000. But that today we're not talking about that. Today, I'll save that for next Tuesday. We'll get a little messy next week. But today, I want to tackle a lot of things that come up on my feed. I am a digester of news. I'm a early 30s millennial in that, or in that breath, I grew up reading the newspaper. In fact, one of my first little side hustles with my aunt was delivering newspapers to corporations. She would go to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, which is the local newspaper here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We would load up the trunk. My cousin and I, her youngest child, would go to the local malls, local businesses, and drop off mail or drop off the newspaper. So, um, in hindsight, I didn't get paid for that, and I should probably talk to her about that. But she is currently in the hospital, so I'm not gonna bring that up. But because I'm like, where was my coin? What was my coin for that? But I didn't get paid. But I said all that to say, my father, being the veteran that he is, he grew up always reading the newspaper. You know, I remember in grade school doing exercises, pre, you know, everyone having a digital computer or having a computer in their hand by way of a smartphone, or even having computers at home. Although I did have a computer in my bedroom growing up. And then at my dad's house, I had it was a family computer, but I was really the only person using it. So I've always had access to journalism. I never necessarily considered ever writing from a journalistic perspective because that just didn't fancy me, but I do love digesting it. And that all said, I was scrolling the Google News feed and I found quite a few topics that I want to talk about today. But first, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or actually Wisconsin as a state, has a tool that we colloquially call CCAP. And I honestly, I need to stay my ass off of there. But there's a lot of merit to me using it because I'm able to, when I was dating here, which is something I'm not actively seeking out right now, but when I was dating here, I was able to look up cases without having to log in. Like, I know when I lived in Houston, they require a login in Texas, and it's cumbersome. I don't want to deal with that. So instead, I decided to go ahead and let me turn this so that my display doesn't keep turning off. Let's put it on never. Sorry, I have to talk myself through this because the tism and the ADHD, I will forget. Like, what am I doing? Okay, I can put it on 15 minutes. I don't have to put it on never. So there won't be a moment where I'm talking about something for more than 15 minutes and forget to come back. Anyway, so yeah, I was on CCAP. In hindsight, those friends that I was talking about earlier, I had to CCAP them after our friendship dissolved because I'm like, I'm just curious. I don't know. I always used it for romantic partners, but I am adamant now that they should be for everybody, employees and like managers. CCAP everybody. If you live in Wisconsin, CCAP every fucking body. CCAP them all, okay? Because people be lying. And while I'm not of the mind that like people should be judged wholly based on their criminal background, I also understand and think that there's merit to, because a lot of people, do stuff and don't get caught. But if you getting caught and you still doing this shit, and especially when it's repeat offenses, it's like, what the fuck? So what leads me to the conversation today about CCAP is that I CCAP'd my child abuser. I was a victim, and I talk about this a little bit in my first book and a lot more in my fifth book, the first five all being memoirs. I talk about my experience of being a victim of sexual assault, and more specifically by my mom's like lifelong, they had known each other since they were in high school or senior high school together back in the 70s. And um they, my mom and her, we all were in the same church growing up, and they were in the choir together. And because they had that long friendship, it was normal for me to be a part of her care, because she had more kids, and my sister is 15 years older than me. So by the time I was needing consistent care outside of, you know, daycare, when that could be expensive, sometimes I would just be at her house because she already had kids. She had the boy who was he's born in 89, I'm born in 93, so he was 4 years older than I am, and his sister is, I think, a year or two younger than me. So her and I would play together, and he, being her big brother, sometimes would watch us if their mom was, busy doing something. And she designed our church robes. She was heavily involved in church, as was my mother. So there was a kinship that had been developed over the years. And um, starting at about 5 years old, when my grandmother's health, whom I spent a lot of time with, primarily throughout my preschool years, but that time started to dwindle as my grandmother got older because her health continued to decline. So, and my desire to be around other kids increased. I'm 5, so I'm like, I want to go over to somebody where friends at. And his younger sister was 4, 3 or 4, and I remember the day that the first instance happened, like it was yesterday. And I'm again 31, so this is almost 30 years old. And yeah, I found out that he is, not to dwell too much into what happened, because again, it's my book by it. It's in my link tree. The book that talks mostly about it is Amphigalactic, which is my 5th book. The book that touches on it briefly, from a like lesson learning perspective, and like how the aftermath of it, is in my first book, which is A Rose for Sea, which is my first. Oh, that baby was a labor of love. It was basically just like different lessons that I need to learn as a self-proclaimed impatient prodigy, because I had all the makings to be this world-renowned prodigy, but there were a lot of lessons that I needed to learn and hadn't learned, and all that, whatever. But I don't want to get too much into book talk. We'll talk more about that on the 11th, on my actual book talking day. But yeah, so I found out scrolling through CCAP this morning, and I decided, I'm like, I should put this man's name in. I wonder, granted, he does not live here anymore. Last I heard, he lived in Texas with his mother, because his mother and sister both moved to just outside of Dallas. But then, per my findings, he had moved to Arizona as well. Now, my findings came up that he is currently incarcerated in Dodge County, I believe, because he did the same thing as an adult. Mind you, when I was 5, he was 9. So that's how old we were when it started. I was 11 when I asked him to stop, making him 15, 16, 15. Girl, can you count? 15. So he was very, very well into high school, and I was still in 5th grade when I asked him, like, dude, I'm self-harming, it's causing self-injurious behavior. I didn't say that explicitly, but I'm like, it's bleeding literally and figuratively into my self-care because of what you keep doing to me. So stop. And then I asked to stop going over there. And then about a year later, it came out that it happened, and it was showing up in my writing. If y'all remember back in the day, I don't know if y'all did it, but in my middle school, because it came out the year prior or the year following in my 6th grade year. And in 6th grade, in the English language art portion of my day, we had a composition notebook. And that composition notebook was filled with daily journals, writing prompts that we were given each day. And we would get like these 10, 20, 30-minute free writes, depending on like what the lesson plan was for the day. Well, my free writes started to get really dark and self-deprecating and self-loathing. And so that warranted me to... Oh, that cloud is big. The sun just went away. I need to stop recalling YouTube videos. That's all I can think of. My my hunger went away. It's moving back. There it is. Anyway, so yeah, I found this morning that he did something to a young person. I don't. The gender wasn't specified. But the felony itself is second degree SA. And it explicitly stated that they were under the age of 16, which is a felony C. And what was most disheartening about the case records is that he only was charged with 4 years and with a max of 8. And he has no restitution. He is a registered sex offender for the rest of his life, a lifetime registration. But he had to only pay $1,600. And that wasn't even restitution, that was in court fees. So no fines, no nothing. And I'm curious of what, and I'm potentially going to be talking with my lawyer because I can't obviously seek out legal action from a criminal standpoint against him. Or at least I don't think I can. Maybe I don't know if there's what the statute of limitations is for sexual assault. But I obviously still deal heavily with that. Granted, I've gone through therapy to heal that anguish, but any survivor can tell you, especially autistic survivors can tell you that never goes away. Like I'm even right now in physical therapy for hip issues because of how many times I was forcibly forced to do things and like my body, I didn't even realize like my body didn't even develop properly because of how much unhealed trauma physically was happening to my hips being, because obviously to do the tango and which it was penetrative and not to get descriptive, my hips were involved and sometimes my legs were folded back and forced into certain positions that were uncomfortable, and that bled into hypersexuality in my middle years and becoming a mother at 15, and just it's showed up in so many areas of my life that I wish he could be held accountable even more because the 4 years max is disturbing. And that speaks to a greater conversation about how sexual assault is viewed in this country and has been thus far, and what my fears of the impending administration, which I'll be talking about in a moment, and how that all is related. That said, I said I went and found some news stories that I want to talk about. So I'll get off of my own personal trauma, but I did want to at least open the session today with the chaos that is that. Now, many of you may have heard and may know about the Sade Robinson homicide that originally happened. She was, what the hell? Oh, I'm getting an ad. I'm like, what is that? She was murdered. I don't even know. I'm pulling up this news article. I can't tell you. I'll just play the video. How about that?
Hi, my name is Dave.
Oh my days.
Not getting up since I was a kid, and I bring that same spirit.
Man accused of killing and dismembering a woman after a first date now says he has an alibi. Bill Miston was just in court for Maxwell Anderson's trial. Bill, this was supposed to start next week, but we had a big turn in court. What happened?
Well, Anderson's defense attorney.
So this is only talking about the recent news that was just released yesterday. But what it is that Maxwell Anderson is on trial currently, and his trial has been delayed, which they'll expound on in relation to him murdering or being charged with the homicide of Sade Robinson, a young 19-year-old Black woman. Maxwell is white. Domestic violence is really on the rise here in the U.S. particularly, but more specifically in the state of Wisconsin, and even more specifically on a micro level here in the county of Milwaukee. And I was not living in Milwaukee when this story originally was released and when it originally happened. I was actually living in North Carolina, which is where I'm building my home now. So I came home to my mom's house because I'm like, I'm coming home. I'm not going to pay this $2,000 a month rent when I could just build my no, come to my ass home. Anyway, so I've been following this story, and it's disheartening to know that now he's claiming an alibi, which that was never mentioned in the original discussion, the proceedings, the court. Like his lawyers tried to get him bond and bail when like there was so much evidence about that's against him, and so I don't know how this is going to play out, but I'll let this play. It's only about a minute.
Asked for more time to review materials, actually review Anderson's cell phone data. As a part of a defense, they intend to mount, if this case goes to trial, that Anderson couldn't be in two places at once. Now, prosecutors say Maxwell Anderson killed 19-year-old Sade Robinson back in April, dismembered her body, and scattered her remains around Milwaukee County, and later torched Robinson's car in Milwaukee and took a bus back to his South Side home. Now, today in court, his attorney says that at trial, they plan to show Anderson has an alibi through his phone. Anderson's attorney asked for the trial to be pushed back to give defense experts more time to review Anderson's cell phone data.
But our expert believes that there's evidence on Mr. Anderson's phone that suggests that he was using the internet, presumably at his home, during the time frame that another person would have been driving Miss Robinson's car around.
Now, the state said it was prepared to head to trial next week, but the judge ended up granting that adjournment in the trial and pushing the date farther back. Now, the new trial is set to begin in May, and Anderson is due back in court in February for a scheduling conference. Reporting live in Milwaukee, Bill Miston, Fox 6 News.
Which that I grieve for the mother, Sade's mother. She actually, I found out through my mom that she is a member. She's a member of the church that I was raised in. So knowing that there is that connection there kind of makes this even more disheartening about just the sheer violence and femicide that's ongoing against women, and more specifically Black women. You know, Sunday was World AIDS Day, and you know, just because of the biases that many people have against homosexual, or I don't even want to say homosexual, I'll say the LGBTQIA community as a whole, as it relates to AIDS, and how that also impacts, you know, femicide, or is it transcide? Is that a term? Am I coining a term here? Or just violence against varying sexual presentations or orientation. So it's especially after, and I'm going to be talking a lot about like Trump's policies and what's going on with him, because I'm completely upset and disheartened by him being voted in office. But I think one of the most jarring immediate aftermaths of the presidential election was seeing so many people saying, "Your body, my choice." And that speaks to just the mindset of males. And I don't want to generalize here, but what can you do? You know, I want to go back to the original story though, because I don't want to misspeak. Okay, let me just type her name in. I thought there was gonna be a link to it. But so okay, that didn't do what I needed to do. Let's get rid of that. Let's go back to April 1st through July, because I don't want, seriously, I should have this stuff just on already because this is pissing me off. There we go. July 1st, because I don't want more recent. Okay, so from my findings, or from what it's saying here, her human arm was found in Waukegan, which is across the state line. I don't know if that makes this federal, but the Lake County, Illinois coroners back in June, God, the freaking obsession with the ads today is obscene. So she was reportedly missing on April 2nd, and then she had later been identified as a homicide victim. June 18th, the Illinois Coroner's Office announced that they had found a human arm on the beach in Waukegan, and it confirmed to be belonging to her. Now, it being on the beach, I don't know if it was maybe tossed in the lake, which goes from Canada down to Indiana. So and they discovered it ironically on my birthday on May 11th. And it's just, God, it's just heartbreaking. I'm gonna go back one more. The original. Is this the video? Because that way I can just play it. Oh, that was a laugh at it.
Suing the man who's charged with killing and mutilating her during a first date in April. Our Durante Matthews is live tonight with exactly what the family is seeking. Durante?
Yeah, Ted, that's all laid out here in this 30-page lawsuit that actually goes into the disturbing details surrounding Sade Robinson's death, and also just the psychological, emotional, and financial impact it's had on her family. They're now seeking damages while also hoping to find peace.
Very traumatic. Emotionally, daily, dealing with trauma, me and my daughter.
It's trauma Sheena Scarborough says her family can't shake.
She wants some control back. She wants some peace back.
The family is still in pieces 2 months after the death of Sade Robinson.
Right now, her life is in a state of chaos.
Now, in a 30-page wrongful death suit, they're suing the man accused of killing and dismembering Sade after a first date, Maxwell Anderson, who's currently in the Milwaukee County Jail.
Family would like to protect their rights, protect the image of their daughter.
The suit states the family wants all of the future rights and financial gains from Sade's and Anderson's images, including for movies, television, books, and interviews.
No criminal should have the right to make money off of harm that they do to the community.
They're also looking for all damages and emotional distress related to Robinson's death, as well as any profit from the recent sale of Anderson's home.
We're going to try to get to the bottom of that transfer.
The family's attorney, Verona Swanigan, says there's no specific dollar amount they're looking for right now. She says a jury will determine damages. Meanwhile, family members say they're using drones to search for Sade's remains, but the number of searchers has decreased.
I think people think that just because the memorial happened that it was over, and
We started searching, but we haven't.
Family says they hope a successful lawsuit adds to Sade's legacy.
She wants to be able to say that this is who my child was and who she should be remembered as.
And another interesting thing, something that we haven't heard from before, this lawsuit actually alleges that community members found Sade's finger on Maxwell Anderson's property. Now, police have not confirmed this, but the family's attorneys say they do have witnesses who's willing to testify to this. Family's attorney also says that they hope Maxwell Anderson's criminal case wraps up before the civil one. Reporting live in Milwaukee, Durante Matthews, Fox 6 News.
So what I originally was referring to, what just happened recently, was the criminal case, but now I did not. This is news to me that they were filing a wrongful death lawsuit, which in addition to all of that, the element of her likeness being included in the lawsuit is remarkable in and of itself, because we've seen in the recent years Milwaukee being the home place of Jeffrey Dahmer and where most of his atrocities occurred. We've seen a lot of that play out in true crime documentaries, and I think Ryan Murphy created it. I haven't watched it because, I mean, I know people who lived through that, so I have no desire to see the dramatization of it. And so we've seen the rise, despite being someone who thoroughly enjoyed Forensic Files growing up and really enjoys Criminal Minds, which gets to more of the forensic aspect and even the criminality and the psychopathy of someone's, person as to why they would do this, ergo Criminal Minds, by the title. But what we keep seeing happening in these dramatizations is that these families are not necessarily getting any type of restitution, if you will, as it relates to the production of these films, and their likeness is being shared. And so I'm actually very proud that they have an attorney that is fighting for them. Because even if he gets off from a criminal standpoint, this bears weight to him taking her life. I'm not of the mind, and I don't believe that he has a true alibi, but I am going to keep following. I hate how long cases take, especially here in Milwaukee County, because it just prolongs that grief. And I'm keeping the family lifted because they deserve so much better. So it's just a sad, all around sad experience and sad thing to witness, because yeah. So moving on to, and kind of carrying on with this sexual assault and the sadness that is there was recently, I saw that there was a 59-year sentencing of a Milwaukee man for a child sexual assault, which is very strange. And I hope that encourages a broader implication of sentencing standards and rehabilitation programs, because it is the first of its kind, making its way to the Wisconsin Law Journal, discussing how unique this case is, because he was sentenced to 59 years in potentially 88 years of extended supervision. That's unheard of for victims of sexual assault. And I'm just of the mind that I hope that this deepens and expands the research and the penalties for violent offenders, especially those of children, because those have lasting effects. And I am proof of that shit. I'm 31 and I still have moments where I wake up in terror because of what someone did to me, and it sucks. I would not wish this on really anyone, because it's not fun. It's scary. It's traumatic. It's just all around an icky feeling. I guess that's the simplest way I can say it. So I'm looking at this note here. It says, according to the criminal complaint, Ulysses Keys, which is the guy who was he was only fined $2,500 after he was found guilty of several counts. It was just announced last week on the 26th that he was sentenced to 59 years of confinement and then those additional 88 years of extended supervision, a lifetime on the sex offender registry, and only fined at $2,500. He's guilty of 4 counts of second degree sexual assault of a child, 2 counts of child exploitation, and 1 count of repeated sexual assault of the same child, and 3 counts of possession of child pornography. My God, today. This sentence so the Attorney General here says that this sentence shows that those who commit heinous crimes against children face a long time behind bars. But it is one of its first and I hope at a national level this kid encourage and inspire greater consequences for offenders. Again, especially those that are offending children and committing them against children. The complaint Keys talked to several girls aged 13 to 15 on Snapchat when he was 24 and 25 years old. It says images were sent in exchange over the app with minors. He also met up with minors and had sexual intercourse in exchange for buying vapes, cigarettes, and fast food. And then he recorded multiple, like, that's disheartening. And I'm just of the mind that as a whole, this country does not, and I mean, not even just as a whole for this country, globally, sexual assault, child arranged marriages, and just violence against children is such a larger, more macro issue that really needs to be discussed more in depth. And I think a large part of it is that I saw a TikTok recently that said people don't see children as having autonomy and having thoughts and feelings, and they delineate that those first 18 years or whatever the legal age is per country is when kids are responsible for thinking and breathing like their parents expect them to, or the people of authority in their life expect them to. And then there's like a switch that's supposed to happen when they become adults. And I think as a parent who has a teenager, I'm of the mind that that's not really the most helpful process. You know, those first several years obviously built that foundation to where you trust them and they trust themselves. And I am a firm believer that teen years, and more specifically the teen years before they're a legal adult, is the perfect opportunity for them to practice having autonomy and making decisions for themselves while they're in your care, so that when they become an adult, they feel confident and they feel reassured and self-assured that they're capable of making decisions. So that's another conversation probably that I'll save for another Talk Tuesday. But yeah. Speaking of earlier, I was talking about some of the political developments that are going on. One of the things that I saw highlighted like insanely across the news tab of Google was that Biden pardoned his son, and how people are thinking that that's going to tarnish his legacy. Oh, let me turn this off. That was obnoxious. He's decided to pardon his son on his final month of the White House, and apparently it's threatening to erode his legacy as he begins to and prepares to leave office. Biden is set to conclude his one term as a president with notable legislative achievements and a fundamentally strong economy, and having navigated the end of a once in a generation pandemic. So, you know, I have my reservations about Biden being the president for the last 4 years. But in that same breath, I have to take it with a grain of salt, knowing that he started with Trump's America, and we're getting like he's beginning and ending in Trump's administration. And I don't necessarily think that this is going to tarnish his legacy as completely. But His decision to pardon Hunter after repeatedly saying he would not do so is casting a cloud. It truly is casting a cloud of his presidency, and it furthers the conversation in the word I'm looking for, and the critique that Biden hasn't been consistent in his presidency and his administration. He'll say one thing, do another, and there are some things that we can give him true credit for, and I know that his presidency will be discussed for years to come in the political science, like long after he's gone, and well into my mid-adult years. Political science majors will study his presidency. Additionally, people will also be studying Trump's administration, term 1 and versus term 2, being that he's headed back to the White House. But a lot of people, a presidential historian, Alexis Cole, she stated, "It's been astonishing to watch Biden cast a long shadow over his many achievements in office, simply by acting as many presidents do, which is from a place of outsized ego." And I can agree. There's been a lot of very strange, we spent the first half of the year concerned with his cognitive function and maybe even cognitive decline. And it seems like since he stepped out of the re-election process and pushed Kamala to the pedestal, he's been on this very childlike antics. And I mean, with my understanding of cognitive decline, that is pretty normal for those who don't even have any cognitive issues like Alzheimer's and things like that. But in general, I think cognitive ability in people is like a bell curve. And as you get closer to those latter years, there are some examples and some proof to how people sometimes will return to childlike antics and having childlike mentality. And that's just the normal process of life. But I'm finding and I'm realizing that it's a bit more concerning from a presidential standpoint. You are the leader of the free world. Act like it. And let me see. The president announced unexpectedly this past Sunday, that he's departed for a week-long trip to Africa, that he's issuing the complete pardon of his son, absolving him of the conviction of federal gun charges and of a guilty plea for federal tax charges. So I admittedly say I did not know anything about what was going on with his son, but that is concerning, and that is something that I'm curious how Republicans who already have their own biases towards Democrats will discuss this in the next coming days, because again, this is hot off the press. This came out at 6 a.m. Eastern time today. So I'm just moving on into Trump. So it looks like per AP News, Trump's FBI pick has no plans to reshape the bureau. Kash Patel is his name, and has said this is what he's basically said he wants to do. So he's mused about shutting down the FBI's Washington headquarters. They moved into Pennsylvania Avenue. The first FBI employees moved into the current Pennsylvania Avenue headquarters 50 years ago. But if Patel has his way, the J. Edgar Hoover building could be shut down with its employees dispersed, which is crazy to think about, because earlier I mentioned my love of Criminal Minds. Granted, Criminal Minds is based in Quantico, but I've also been binging and recently finished Bones, which is a DC-based show where they work, one of the main characters works out of the Hoover building. So Patel goes on to say, and he said this on an interview back in September, "I shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopened it the next day as a museum of the deep state. Wow. Then I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops." agents do a lot more deductive, findings before they just beat cops. But I digress. In a book I guess a book last year, he titled Government Gangsters, the Deep State, the Truth, and the Battle for Our Democracy. He proposed a more modest reform of having the headquarters moved out of Washington to prevent institutional capture and curb FBI leadership from engaging in political gamemanship. He's talked about finding conspirators in the government and in the media. He goes on to say, we're going to come after people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections, which is so insane. It is so insane to imply that one party rigged the election, as if this past election didn't have glaring examples of it being rigged, from ballot boxes being burned to even to this day, people across social media talking about how when they check their name, whether it be from mail-in, there were mail-in delays. Even in Wisconsin, more specifically here in Milwaukee, there were 30,000 votes that had to be recounted the night of because the system magically failed. So I find myself like baffled by the unmitigated gall of Republicans sometimes in their one-dimensional, very binary thinking approach to political science. And I often wonder, how did they amass this power? Granted, Patel is not white, but I was recently watching a series of TikToks that kind of kept coming up on my feed, which was a result of an interview, like one of those TikTok interviews, street interviews, where the guy had asked, in Australia, what's the percentage of, do you believe, the white people there are in the US or across the globe? And many people gave these double digit amounts, and it turns out that it was only 7 to 8%. White people only account for 7 to 8% across the globe. And I watched someone else have a comment on that, and that speaks to, and it's kind of jarring to see how much white power, white nationalism, colonialism, colonization is prevalent, and white supremacy is prevalent. And it begs the question, are they just good at what they do, or are we upholding the atrocities that they've enforced on many Black and brown and other POCs across the globe? So I find myself baffled by someone who, Patel, I'm going to assume he's of Indian background, and that may be a gross misconception about that I'm having. But yeah, this is crazy. In an interview with conservative strategist Steve Bannon, Patel repeated falsehoods about Joe Biden and the stolen election. Patel himself has said it is yet to be determined whether such crackdown would be done civilly or criminally, as it relates to disclosing. Wait, what? I skipped ahead because I have a bad habit of skimming. He'd back a reversal of the current Justice Department policy that generally prohibits prosecutors from seizing the records of journalists in leak investigations. That policy was implemented in 2021 by Attorney General Merrick Garland, following the uproar of the revelation that the Justice Department during the Trump administration had obtained phone records of reporters as a part of the investigation of who had disclosed government secrets. Patel himself said he had yet to determine whether such crackdown would be done civilly or criminally. His book includes several pages of formal officials from the FBI, Justice Department, and other federal agencies he identified as being part of the executive branch deep state. Under the FBI's own guidelines, criminal investigations can't be rooted in arbitrary or groundless speculation, but instead must have authorized purpose to detect or interrupt criminal activity. Oh, yes, yeah. Trump apparently intends to nominate former Attorney General Pam Bondi as the Attorney General. He wants a major surveillance reform. In an interview recently, he doubled down by saying it major reform tons. Um, the position aligns him to have both left-leaning civil libertarians who have long been skeptical of government power and Trump supporters outraged by well-documented surveillance missteps during the FBI's investigation into the potential ties between Russia and Trump's 2016 campaigns. So he wants to survey. He, in one breath, says that Biden rigged the election in 2016 or 2020, but in the same breath, he wants to reform the surveillance missteps and the surveillance procedure because of the investigation that the FBI put into Russia and Trump's potential ties and suspected and looted ties. That is, ay, Dios mío. If confirmed, Patel would take over the FBI amid continued debate over a particularly contentious provision of FISA, known as Section 702, which permits the U.S. to collect without warrant the communications of non-Americans located outside the country for the purpose of gathering foreign intel. Biden in April signed a 2-year extension of the authority following a fierce congressional dispute centered on whether the FBI should be restricted from using the program to search for Americans' data. Though the FBI boasts a high compliance rate, analysts have been blamed for a series of abuses and mistakes, including improperly curing. Oh my God, the lisp is lisping. Curing the intelligence repository for information about the Americans or others in the U.S., including members of Congress, participants in racial justice protests in 2020, and the January 6th riot in the U.S. Capitol. Because of the budget of FISA was up this cycle, we demanded Congress to fix it. And do you know that what the majority in the House, where the Republicans did, they bent the knee. They reauthorized it. This is what Patel said. He's also calling for a reduction in the size of the intelligence community, which includes the CIA and the NSA, being the National Security Agency. After the September 11th attacks, then FBI Director Robert Mueller faced down calls from some Congress who thought the FBI should split up with a new domestic intelligence agency created in its wake. The idea died, but Mueller committed resources into forming what for decades had been primarily domestic law enforcement agency into an intelligence gathering institution equally focused on combating terrorism, spies, and foreign attacks. Wow. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for this shit because it's getting real. Even more, let's talk about the next thing on today's docket: the congressional freaking gridlock and shutdown threats. This morning that came out? There is no easy answer for Republicans as they move forward to a stopgap bill to push key government funding deadline to early 2025, which could complicate Trump's other plans. Again, this was released this morning at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. As Congress returns this week for one last burst of activity before it wraps up the session, it faces a key deadline of December 20th to avert a government shutdown. I feel like I've been through so many fucking government shutdowns in my lifetime. It's insane. It's insane. Democrats and Republicans appear resigned to passing a continuing resolution or CR that would temporarily fund the government into early 2025, most likely March. As they run out of time to strike a full funding deal this year, the two parties have even agreed on an overall spending level for the new fiscal year, let alone how to allocate money across the government. The upside, so for Republicans, that's a double-edged sword. The upside for Republicans is punting the deadline. In punting the deadline is that they would have more leverage to shape government funding in the new year, with President-elect Donald Trump returning to the White House and the GOP taking control of the Senate, maintaining the narrow House majority. The big downside, however, is it will create a critical deadline in the early Trump presidency, potentially taking valuable time away from confirming his nominees through the Senate and the big party line bill that Republicans are looking at to extend his tax cuts and advance his immigration and border security agenda. The majority leader, Steve Scalise, says we've got a lot of things we've got to do a lot of things at the same time. We're going to be walking and chewing gum, which is a pretty common saying about doing two things at one time, which my autistic brain never has understood that. Because why can't you walk and chew gum? Is that not what most people do? Do you have to sit down when you're chewing gum? That that colloquial phrase or idiom is so beyond me sometimes. I'm like, but I digress. Senator John Kennedy says that there's a lot of things that I would prefer, but realistically, we're not going to be put together a budget between now and Christmas. It's not going to happen. I expect us to have a CR probably through the middle of May, and expect the CR will be pretty thin. Funding the government, he's not saying this, is just notes here in this NBC News article. Funding the government is usually a pretty messy process that requires bipartisan support, as the bills are subject to the Senate 60 vote threshold. Democrats have significant power to shape the legislation regardless of the deadline. They hold the majority now. In the beginning of the next year, Republicans have 53 senators, far short of the 60 needed to control the process themselves. Another dynamic that is passing another massive Christmas time funding package would be a non-starter for many House Republicans, and it could imperil House Speaker Mike Johnson's bid to get reelected in the position on January 3rd, particularly with the already slim GOP majority shrinking further. Another drawn-out speaker fight could also complicate Trump's presidency, albeit in different ways. Representative Mike Simpson of Idaho, Republican out of Idaho, is a senior member of Appropriations Committee and writes funding bills, said that there's little time. Once they decide what they're going to do, if they're going to try to get any of these appropriation bills done before, or whether they're going to do a CR for all of them until March, I mean, that's the debate. We can all get them done, he said. We could probably negotiate if we have a top line number. We could probably negotiate several, maybe even 7 or 8 of the bills in them done by the 20th. But it would have to we would have to get that number fairly soon. So yeah, it's some weird stuff. There's some shit happening in Congress. And as someone who enjoyed, that was probably the only part of history and social studies that I really enjoyed, is the political aspect of it, because I mean that impacts our day-to-day life. I didn't really care to hear about white history and war history and the many times that I just kept learning the same shit over and over again. But learning about what may be influencing today, that was probably the only tangible aspect of history that I enjoyed. And even now as a sociology minor, I enjoy looking at this from the sociological lens, which I won't necessarily do in this moment, but this is prompting a class that I'm taking in the spring, and I'm really excited about how that's going to what I'm going to be learning more specifically in that class as relates to political science. That all being said, there are a lot of Democratic politicians who are bunkering down, if you will, to try to make their constituents in their respective, areas, whether that be the state as a governor or their city as a mayor or anywhere in between. More specifically, the California Democrats are preparing for Trump, but vowed to renew their focus on affordability. Gavin Newsom has a special session coming Monday, and I don't know if that means today or next Monday, because this article came out yesterday. He has a strong, renewed focus and vowed to focus on that affordability aspect, which I'm interested to see how that plays out, because while Los Angeles and San Diego and San Francisco and Sacramento are relatively expensive, I don't know how much more affordable they can afford to make the state, being the economy of the state. So I'm curious to watch that and see how that plays out. Our task this session is urgent. It's clear we must chart a new path forward to renew the California dream by focusing on affordability, which is something stated by Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas. He's a Democrat out of the Hollister area. Legislation announced Monday would ready the state for potential legal battles with the federal government over issues such as immigration, reproductive rights, and environmental regulations by setting aside $25 million for anticipated legal costs. So they're ramping up. We already know y'all trying to come for us, because but California is such a blue state, and such a large blue state. Competing with the likes of a large red state like Texas, which I'm so glad I no longer live there, because boy, is that ghetto. We will always collaborate with our federal partners. California will be ready vigorously to defend our interests and values from any unlawful action by the incoming Trump administration, which is what Assemblyman Jesse Gabriel said, who authored two bills. Who authored both bills? What bills are they talking about? I skipped ahead too much. What bills are they talking about? I don't know. I don't know what bills. Did I miss something? Anyway, Governor Gavin Newsom called a special session to consider both proposals. Which, again, what both am I missing? Did I miss something? Aha! So there are two very important issues in November, is what Robert Rivas said. First, they will continue to believe deeply in California's value of tolerance, of equality, and of human rights, which is perfectly in line with this month, because December is Human Rights Awareness Month. And then they also second that the constituents, they feel that they need to feel that the state of California is working for them. Rivas pushed lawmakers to focus their energy on ideas to reduce the price of housing, household goods, and the cost of starting a business. As a business owner, thank you for that. Because being a business owner anywhere in the U.S. is hard, but I can only imagine doing it in California is even more financially difficult. They're focusing. That was where they focus on affordability. Blase. So jumping back to what I was saying about Gavin Newsom, he's establishing a legal response strategy before Trump takes office in January. During Trump's first term in office, California filed more than 100 lawsuits challenging administration moves on healthcare, carbon emission standards, and protection of undocumented residents who arrived in the country as kids. As we think about the resistance, I really do believe that we have to get ready, and we are ready, said Assemblyman Sade. I'm not going to say her last name, a Democrat newly elected from the Los Angeles district. But in a real way, it can't be just about the resistance to the man in the White House. Our constituents are most impacted by what we do, not by what's done there. And that's to be said, which is why I'm proud that my generation as millennials are talking more openly, thanks to the likes of social media, and just even in our personal conversations about the importance and the value of doing your due diligence and your research on all politicians, assemblymen, council members, governors, Senate judges, all of those people, everybody, mayors, if I didn't say that, mayors, aldermen or alderwomen, alder people, older persons, I don't know, whatever. In any case, there is more focus that needs to happen on those local elections, because the reform that we're all desiring and hoping to see has to come out of personal values being prioritized. Like, you have to look at it from a macro and a micro perspective, by understanding what your personal needs, personal goals are, and then aligning that politically to the community. The urge among Democratic lawmakers to fortify resistance to the federal government risks sending the wrong message to voters after an election in which Trump gained ground in counties across the state, said Mike Gatto, a former Democratic Assembly member. He goes on to say, I think that there are so many issues that the public wants to tackle, and I don't think paying more lawyers and I don't think paying lawyers is high atop that list. There's no reason to focus on funding the Attorney General's office at this point unless you wanted a headline. It's clear that the headline was secured. So he's opposing harboring all of that money to prepare for legal battles, and feels that it could be better suited to be used to fix many of the issues, which I can understand the merit to that. Jeff Gonzalez, which is another assembly member, says there's a litany of issues that we need to work together on. To start off this legislative session by saying us and them, that's not going to work out. We need to come together. So yeah, it goes on. Someone goes on to say, this is Gonzalez. This is Gonzalez still talking. He goes on to say, people are fed up with the policies that have put them in a place where they can't afford milk, they can't afford eggs, and they can't afford gas, he says. So they're tired of the same old, which there is tons of merit to that. Holding public servants, which are politicians, accountable for their choices I'm excited to see and intrigued to see how that's going to change over the coming years. Zooming out to more of a macro issue, there are some social and global issues that I want to touch on, and then so I have a total of five topics left, and then we're gonna wrap up and we got here. So apparently, South Korea has the president declares emergency martial law. So that's interesting. I'm wondering how that's going to impact, relations. So let's just read it here. South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol, I'm probably slaughtering that. I might say it right, but I don't know. Declared martial law in an unannounced late-night TV address Tuesday. So this was literally coming into today, accusing the country's main opposition party of sympathizing accusing the country's main opposition party of sympathizing with North Korea and of anti-state activities. The last time that a South Korean president declared martial law was in 1990 during a nationwide uprising led by students and labor unions. In the surprise announcement, he cited a motion by the opposition Democratic Party, which was a majority in parliament, to impeach top prosecutors and reject government budget proposals. So yeah, this is crazy. Yoon labeled the opposition's actions. Did I skip ahead too far? Okay, National Assembly Chairman Woo Won-sik labeled the president's announcement invalid following the unanimous vote and called on him to immediately lift the emergency measures. Woo, a member of the opposition Liberal Democratic Party, added, the people should ... rest easy. The National Assembly will defend democracy with the people. It was not immediately clear that what the effect of the vote will have under South Korean law. The president is obliged to comply. Yoon labeled the opposition actions as a clear anti-state behavior aimed at inciting rebellion, which Wow, this is why am I living through perilous times? Like, what is going on? The president assured the public, "We will eliminate the anti-state forces and restore the country to normalcy as quickly as possible." While acknowledging that martial law might cause some inconvenience, he promised to minimize its impact on the public. And there's a picture of soldiers advancing the main building of the National Assembly following the Korean president's announcement. And there they are. Just wow. While Yoon did not clarify what specific measures will be taken, Yonhap News reported, citing the full military decree which bans all political and parliamentary activities following the arrest without warrants. The decree also prohibits denying free democracy and attempting a subversion and outlawing fake news. Sounds very Trump-like, and manipulating public opinion. People who violate the decree can be arrested or raided without the need for a warrant. Oh, wow. It's funny because, not funny, haha, but I was literally thinking about going to Korea next year. My daughter loves Korean food, and we were thinking about like country hopping through Asia, going to Korea, China, and somewhere else. But I gotta take Korea off the list. We're not going to Seoul. We're not going. Just after 1 a.m., speaking of, in Seoul, Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, dozens of troops who had entered the main parliament building main parliament building prior to the vote were seen withdrawing, according to Korean newspaper Chosun Ilbo, and local TV news stations. Citizens waiting outside the building cheered when news came that the lawmakers vote according to Chosun. I don't know what that name is. It's a newspaper, a Korean newspaper, with some shouting, "Long live the Republic of Korea," and "Yoon Sung Seol step down." So like they get the fuck out of office. It stuns residents and lawmakers. So many people were like, what are you? Someone named who is this person? Someone named Lee. They don't say who Lee is. Maybe think of Rush Hour. Anyway, meanwhile, Lee, the leader of the opposition Democratic Party, said that the emergency of martial law declaration was unconstitutional, calling it a move that goes against the people. President Yoon declared emergency law for no reason. Tanks, armored vehicles, and soldiers with guns and swords will soon control the country. That's crazy. This president has only been a president representing the People Power Party, which I'm curious as to, like, I guess I need to do a little bit more research on their politics because as I was mentioning earlier, or I think I was thinking it, maybe not mentioned it, there needs to be a revisit of the two-party system here in the U.S. And so hearing that there's this something called the People Power Party, wow, the alliteration, is interesting in and of itself by the party title, but he's been the president since 2022. So to have done this within the first 2 years of your campaign and administration is insane. It also mentions that he's a newcomer to politics, having spent the previous 27 years of his career as a prosecutor. So that's very telling. Again, I'm looking from a American lens because I am an American. But since taking office, but imagining if someone was a prosecutor and then becomes the president, I would imagine that some of their biases from their days as a prosecutor would bleed into their presidency, and maybe that's in and of itself warranting this unmitigated martial law. But I digress. It says, since taking office, succeeding the liberal president Moon Jae-in, he was faced with the raft of challenges from the permanent threat of North Korea to rising tensions between South Korea's major partners, the U.S. and China, as well as plummeting birth rates. That 4B movement is going nuts over there. Is 4B going on in Korea, or is it? I don't know. I don't want to speak out of her. But I'm guessing the plummeting birth rates kind of alludes to that. Yoon has long taken a tough stance on North Korea, a shift from his predecessor Moon, who favored dialogue and peaceful reconciliation. Yoon lambasted this approach as subservient. So yeah, there's some drama afoot in South Korea. It's crazy. Going back to Trump, and again, from a global perspective, another country that we have alliances with, Trump, per Fox News, Trump promises hell to pay in Middle East if hostages are not released before he takes office. Trump's threat came days after Hamas released a video showing an Israeli American hostage pleading for his release. I'm going to play this video here.
Jonathan, President Biden heading back to Washington after spending the holiday in Massachusetts. He says his administration is working with the FBI to investigate a series of threats against some of President-elect Trump's cabinet nominees and Democratic lawmakers in Connecticut. Lucas Tomlinson is live in Nantucket with more on this. Lucas.
And Anita, good evening. And just a few hours ago, Hamas has released a new hostage video, this time showing 19-year-old Idan Alexander. He is from New Jersey. He's a dual citizen who is a lone soldier in the Israeli Defense Forces Golani Brigade. And just moments ago, the White House has released a statement about this hostage video saying, quote, "The hostage video released today of American-Israeli citizen Idan Alexander is a cruel reminder of Hamas's terror against citizens of multiple countries, including our own. We have been in touch with Idan's family. The war in Gaza would stop tomorrow and the suffering of Gazans would end immediately and would have ended months ago if Hamas agreed to release the hostages." The statement went on to say that there is a deal that remains on the table. Now, yesterday here in Nantucket, while doing some window shopping, some eyebrows were raised when Biden walked out of this bookstore with a copy of The 100 Years' War on Palestine, a history of settler colonial conquest and resistance, which some see as anti-Israeli. It was written by Columbia University professor emeritus Rashid Khalidi, who's a former PLO spokesman when it was still a designated terrorist group here in the United States.
Wow.
And a reminder, Anita, that while there is a ceasefire with Hezbollah, it expires when President Biden leaves office, and there's no deal with Hamas right now, where 4 American citizens, including Idan Alexander, remain alive and in captivity 420 days at least since the October 7th Hamas massacre. And as you mentioned, President Biden will be heading back to the White House tonight in just a few hours to mark World AIDS Day tomorrow. He's also heading on another trip abroad, going to Africa, to the country of Angola. Yeah.
All right, yeah.
So as I mentioned earlier, Trump's currently in Africa, and I'm confirming, or I've been just confirmed by that last little statement, that he's in Angola. But this video, despite this article being published yesterday at 3:23 Eastern, this video seems to be recorded from Saturday, because I heard him reference tomorrow being Hamas, or tomorrow being World AIDS Day, which was Sunday the 1st. So this must have been recorded. That video must have been recorded on the 30th. But to hear,
Thank you for that
to hear that Biden is reading a book about Palestinian history and the 100 years that they've been occupied, I find that very intriguing, because I'm of the mind that terrorist groups that are protecting the agency and the autonomy of their people have some merit, right? I'm not saying that the 4 Americans that are hostages deserve to be there, but historically, to the point of that 7% of white people across the globe, they're by and large responsible for much of the colonization and marginalization of BIPOC people, which I hate that term, but it's the most succinct way to address all of these subgroups. And with all of that, knowing that Palestine, it's unnerving to hear politicians reduce what's happening in the Middle East to just October 7th, as if there has not been an occupation going on for dozens of years. And so to see that he's, whether it be for the optics or truly for his own understanding, I'm curious as to what was his reasoning behind purchasing or getting that book.
We should all remember there are hostages still being held in Gaza, including those 4 Americans. Lucas Tomlinson, thank you so much for that live report.
So close this. So I'm guessing is Truth Social another application? Anyway, part of this article, it says, in a Truth Social post, Trump has said nothing was done to free those being held by the Iran-backed terror group since October 7, 2023, after Hamas attacked Israel and killed at least 1,200 people, as if thousands of Palestinians hadn't been killed. Like, why are you delineating and hyper focusing on the attack, which has some merit when you are occupied by an outside agency and trivialized to a section of the country that you're in? That occupation has been ongoing. So them finally fighting back and killing a couple hundred people and kidnapping 250 others, at least 7 of the hostages are American. So it's not just 4 people. In this picture were Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin whatever shake hands in the Israeli Museum in Jerusalem. Trump has promised hell to pay. Blase. He says there will be all hell to pay in Middle East for those in charge of who perpetuated these atrocities against humanity. As again, if Israeli people and the Israeli government have not been doing the same, if not worse, atrocities for much longer. But Alexander, which is Idan Alexander, 20, covering his face and crying. He was abducted by the Hamas terrorists on October 7th. They show a picture of him, who was born in Tel Aviv, raised in New Jersey, and currently being held hostage. Part of the video, he explained that he's been prisoner for over 420 days, delivered forced messages to Israeli Prime Minister, had to deliver forced messages to the Prime Minister and Trump. Alexander's family is determined to take every action to bring him home. A permanent ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas remains elusive. Israeli forces continue to conduct military operations in Gaza. The ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon was reached in November following a year of attacks targeting Israel's north by Hezbollah. On Monday, Israel said Hezbollah broke the ceasefire by launching two projectiles. No one was harmed. It's just ongoing BS. Ay, Dios mío. So there's been some moving on to this money in these arms that keep getting sent to Ukraine. Another area of chaos and war. As of this morning, 5:39 a.m., it says that the U.S. is preparing to send Ukraine an additional $725 million in military assistance, including counter drone systems and munition for its high mobility artillery rocket system. My God, today. Which could indicate more of the long range missiles are headed to the battlefield. It's unclear whether the munitions for the HIMARS, HIMARS, are covered. Oh, that makes sense. The High Mobility Artillery Rocket System is HIMARS. It was unclear whether the munition for the HIMARS are coveted ATACMS, which is the Army Tactical Missile System. Too many acronyms. But Ukraine has been pressing for more of a longer range missiles to strike additional targets. And this coming up made me think about the recent strike, the port strike that was happening. And so many people were completely and blissfully unaware that the port strike did not include arms. So while they were striking, they were still sending out arms. Because, again, the U.S. has, of all the things that we import and export, arms are the highest thing that is moving. And here we are sending nearly $1 billion in military assistance to Ukraine. It's crazy. Joe Biden has pledged to spend all the military assistance funds Congress approved this year for Ukraine before the end of his administration on January 20th, which before Monday's announcement included about $7.1 billion in weapons that will be drawn from the Pentagon's stockpiles. $7 billion in weapons. What? We got people homeless, and y'all sending out $7 billion worth of fucking guns? It's crazy. Food high as hell. The priorities. This country is going to always be back on the foundation of war and colonization and tyranny and patriarchy and just switching over to transgender or to social issues. There is a transgender healthcare ban that is happening nationwide. A Supreme Court decision on healthcare bans for transgender youth could impact people nationwide. When Tennessee banned gender-affirming care for transgender youth last year, Sarah, who I don't know who Sarah is, began taking off days of work to drive hundreds of miles to her home in Nashville, or from her home in Nashville to North Carolina clinic that could treat her transgender son. Oh, it's just a story. Okay. But just a month later, a similar ban went effect in North Carolina, which is interesting and good to know, being that I am buying and purchasing a home in North Carolina, right? Or buying land and building a home. Excuse me. In North Carolina, sending Sarah into a panic when she realized the closest state that she could take her son to would be in Ohio, more than 400 miles away. To her relief, North Carolina law made exceptions for children who were already receiving treatment. I should be able to go 5 minutes down the road to have my children taken care of and medication easily received and not have to take a 12-hour trip, Sarah told CNN. Parents like Sarah and transgender communities across the U.S. will be paying close attention Wednesday as the U.S. Supreme Court hears the argument in U.S. versus Scrimetti, a case that could determine whether states can ban certain forms of gender-affirming care for trans children and teens. The case brought by the Biden administration on behalf of families of trans youth challenges the constitutionality of Tennessee's gender-affirming care ban, which restricts puberty blockers and hormone therapy for transgender minors and enacts civil penalties for doctors who violate the law. Now, as a future physician, I have my reservations about this. I do think that gender-affirming care needs to have age-appropriate the word is escaping me. Age-appropriate restrictions where, those who are under the age of 25, because we already know that cognitively your brain is not fully developed before then. So making lifelong decisions, even if they stay consistent beyond that, I think that the doing invasive, whether it be invasive by surgery or invasive by hormone therapy and puberty blockers, I think that there's something to be said about that, because making such grand choices as a teenager, as a young adult, has its risks in and of itself. But I do believe that there still should be a form of gender affirming care that is not as invasive as taking medications that may have side effects or making those uh, those attempts at surgical changes. Oh my God, am I sleepy? What is going on? Um, Tennessee Attorney General John. Oh, so it's the U.S. versus him. Okay, Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti. I don't know his last name. Argued in court documents the law ensures minors do not receive these treatment until they fully understand the lifelong consequences, or until science developed to the point that Tennessee might take a different effect, a different view on its efficacy. Which I can understand and agree with, but I don't think there should be a ban. I just think there should be. I think one, if there not is not already a psychological assessment before these invasive treatments happen, and there should be to the point that he's making additional science developed so that we can confirm the efficacy of the science before we just start taking puberty blockers and hormone therapy, because there are lasting and lifelong effects. um, Sweeping down here, it says what could happen if the ban is struck down. That would be a monumental achievement for the trans legal movement, and it remains a distinct possibility. This is Kate Redburn, a co-director of the law school, Columbia's Law School Center for Gender and Sexuality Law. Gender dysphoria is an enormous distraction from life. It's a barrier for living in the normal, full way, where you can enjoy your day, enjoy going out with your friends, you enjoy being in public. So, uh, and it, for jumping back, it says for children and teens who are unable to get care to treat gender dysphoria, the mental distress a person feels when they feel their sex assigned at birth doesn't align with their gender identity. Being able to access this healthcare could be a transformative effect. And this is the director of the Transgender Surgery and Health Program at Cedar Sinai. So I understand the affirming and what the effects of gender dysphoria as somebody who deals with body dysphoria, while it's not, gender related, it's a dysphoria nevertheless. I understand that feeling, but at the same time, I have ethical concerns. Okay, I have ethical concerns with the invasiveness of certain medications, certain processes and procedures, but I digress. Currently, 26 states across the U.S. have passed laws restricting gender affirming care for trans youth. Bans in Montana and Arkansas have been temporarily blocked. The Williams Institute, a public policy think tank at the University of California, Los Angeles, estimates that more than 110,000 teens live in the states where the bans are in full effect. There are 26 states banning the gender affirming care, and then lawmakers in 16 states and DC have passed protections for trans healthcare since 2022. It looks like the ban, per those 26 states, the only two states that have bans on surgery alone are New Hampshire and Arizona. The other states have it on medication and surgical care. And I see the value of it, at least at minimum, having the surgical care aspect, because there are temporary things that can be done to hide the genitalia and certain the breast of those who are having a gender identity crisis, so to speak, or needing or going through gender dysmorphia, or mitigating their own experience through gender identity. But to my point, I think that there's something to be said about making those lifelong decisions before you're 25, because you still have so much life ahead of you. But I can't speak to it because I have not necessarily gone through that experience. But I do see that there's a value in and of itself to having gender affirming care, because there obviously is a need there. So yeah, that's a heavy topic that I'm curious to keep following. Gosh, I'm scooting down. Sarah, the mother in Tennessee, said the stakes for receiving hormone therapy could not be higher for her child. Before receiving the treatment, she says her son became withdrawn, increasingly frustrated at puberty to transform his body in ways he hated. By the time he was 15, he had attempted suicide 3 times, she said, but since undergoing testosterone therapy, her son feels confident, ongoing, and more at peace with himself. And so I feel like the suicide attempts, back to the point that I was making about psychological care, granted it may be caused by the gender dysmorphia and the frustration about the puberty that he was going through. I think that should have been addressed. I think that is a parental flaw where you're prioritizing a outcome as opposed to mitigating the experience as a whole. But that is another topic for another day. The last topic that I want to talk about before I let you all go for the day, because I've been just yapping away. I've been talking about so much stuff. Last thing, actually, nope, we're not talking about this. I'm going to take that off my list. It was going to be about some affordability in marginalized communities, but I'll say that to next week. But thank y'all so much for coming to Talk Tuesday. I just yapped a lot. I covered a lot, from deeply personal reflections to some of the most pressing issues in most recent conversations that are happening in the world right now. It's really a reminder that while the world is moving and keeps moving, our voices, our stories, and connections really truly matter. And so one thing I just want people to take away from any Talk Tuesday that I have is that community is power. So keep showing up, showing out, and holding space for yourself and for others. And I'll see y'all next time, because I done yapped away and clearly I keep yawning, so I need to go. I have to take a nap. I had exams this morning. Almost done. But I'll see y'all next week. Yeah, see y'all next week. Same vibe, same love. Stay safe, stay grounded, stay unapologetically you. Don't let nobody's ashy ass kids stress you out. And see you soon. Bye.